Well, welcome to another episode of Dad's Old Car. First up, I'm going to talk to my wife Linda about the history of her cars and her father's car, her brother's car, and we'll hear the stories about that. And then later on, we're going to have a look at a couple of unique cars, so look forward to that too. But first up is Linda. Well, with me is my lovely wife Linda, and she's also a camera person. So Linda, when did you learn to drive?
Well, I got my license when I think I was 19. I was quite old. But I learned to drive on my dad's Wolseley. He had a 610.
Wow.
And he was very proud of that. So we'd set off and he would get a bit,
Nervous.
nervous, frustrated. So we would go out from home out to Albany or somewhere and back, and by the time we got home we were both nervous wrecks. So my brother had a PA Vauxhall and he was also very proud of that, my brother Alec, and so to calm me down, he would take me out in his PA Vauxhall and I'd come home feeling much relieved and ready for the next bash with the Wolseley. But the Wolseley was just beautiful. It was that, that walnut mahogany kind of dashboard and that beautiful leather and the little bits that came down at the back to put your cups on. And it was just a luxury car, and I can understand my father being a bit anxious.
I actually had a Wolseley. Our family car was a Wolseley when I had the children, and it was fabulous, like you say, the walnut, and it was a 3-speed overdrive, so on 3 on the floor and a little lever you pulled out, and then I think when you let go of the accelerator it went into gear, and then you wanted to kick it down, you just booted the accelerator, it kicked down the gear, and off you go at 100 miles an hour.
That's right.
It was very, very luxurious car. In fact, we bought it to tow a caravan, so we would go away on caravan holidays with the kids, and it towed the caravan no problem at all. I think it actually had a truck engine in it, had a BMC truck engine in it.
Yes.
But it was very, very quiet. It just just smooth, And the day I brought that home, I I've got a Rolls Royce. Yeah, and the PA Vauxhall, I never actually had a PA Vauxhall.
Oh, well, my brother went through a fleet of vehicles, and that was like primo.
Did he have a V8, like a fathead V8, like
a
lot of young guys?
Yep, his first car that I recall, maybe his second car, was a beautiful old V8, 38 perhaps. 38. And I remember we went from Auckland down to Taupo, just the two of us, and we did it in 3 hours 10, and it just purred along. It was just lovely, and we did it so fast. Yeah, I know, it was fantastic. But I didn't get my license in any of those cars. By the time I got my license, I'd already bought a Morithau, a little tomato red job, and got my license, and I think that was the best day of my whole life. I was so excited. All those exams at school, that was okay, but to pass the driving exam, oh wow. So the very next week, my friend and I went on a camping holiday up north in this little car, and then the tent in the back, and
so you put the tent up?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we had a fabulous time. Her brother was also honeymooning up north in Russell, so we kind of joined them on their honeymoon, which probably wasn't much appreciated, but anyway, it was fun. And my friend was also nursing a broken heart, so there were lots of tears on that trip. But subsequently, coming home, we were coming down into Whangarei, down the hill to the traffic lights in the middle of town, and we just cruised down, and I put on the brakes and nothing happened, and the lights were red. Oh no. And we just cruised right through the intersection. Fortunately there was nobody coming, and we got through that, and I thought, oh my goodness, what's wrong? And then I realized the brakes had totally failed, and it was a Sunday and there was nothing open, no repairs, to be done. So I had to drive it all the way home. This is me with a new license over the Brindouins, and having to, I figured out what to do and go down through the gears and creep down second gear or first gear. So we made it home safely, but phew, I learned a lot on that trip, that's for sure.
I remember an instance on the Brindouins. I had a Land Rover, we called it B2. And I'd taken the boat up north, towed it up north, the bloody thing wouldn't go, and we flattened batteries, and anyway, we finally sort of making our way home. We were going up the Brindouins, and there was a bit of rope on the side of the road where a truck driver had obviously fallen off a truck or something, and I said to Shane, who's sitting by the passenger's door, you could just about jump out and get that, we were going so slow, and he did. Poof, out he went, just about run him over with the trailer. There he is on his knees, skinned elbows. I got it, Dad. And then about 100 yards up the road from that in B2, bang, rattle, and grinding halt. All the gears are gone except top four-wheel drive. So we're moving, hooray! So off we go. We get it almost up to the Waiwera Hill, that last little hill before we get into Auckland, and it just wouldn't go. So we all jumped out and we pushed it the last 10 feet over the hill, and we all jumped back in again, and we made it home. Oh, what a nightmare of a blooming trip that was. And when I got home, my wife said, what time do you call this? These kids are going to go to school and what? So that didn't help. But anyway, the Wolseley, the PA Vauxhall, the V8, beautiful cars, and great memories, Linda. Yes.
Yeah, but don't forget the Mori Thau.
And the tomato red Mori Thau. If you've got a tomato red Mori Thau, there's my contact details. Give us a yell, we'd love to come and have a look at it. Next up, I talked to Mike Cross, who lives in Christchurch, about his 1940 Studebaker. And this 1940 Studebaker belonged to his father. It was the family car, and they did this and that in it. So let's have a chat to Mike. When I bought my Studebaker off Michael Cross, he said he was going to restore his father's 1940 Studebaker, and that's exactly what he did. So let's join Mike and have a look at his 1940 Studebaker. Michael, what year is this car?
This 1940 Studebaker Champion. This was my dad's car. Dad bought it when my twin brother and I were just less than 2 years old. The family of three had grown to five, so he needed a bigger car, and this has been in our family since that day, and that was 1948.
And so did you live out of town, or
yes,
you needed a car?
Yes, we lived in central Otago in a little railway settlement. My dad was a railway worker, and so it was a lot of gravel roads and everything. One of the first things Dad did with his car, apart from paint it pale blue, was to change the wheels from 16-inch rim to 15-inch rim, because he believed they were better in the gravel roads.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I noticed this car hasn't got any running boards. I mean, most cars of this era seem to have running boards. This hasn't.
Yes, this is the first American car to actually come out without running boards. A lot of the American cars came out much later, even up to 1947, before they went to non-running boards or no running boards. So Studebaker were quite inventive as far as that's concerned.
Oh, okay.
They also the first American car to come out with seal beam lights, which was another pretty innovative thing to do.
Well, and I think Studebaker might have been first with hydraulic brakes. Am I right there?
I think they were, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you were, the family grew, how many people would you have in the car?
Oh, yeah, we had a big family. There was 8 of us children in total, but at that time there was 6 of us, and I recall in 1954 in this car going to see the Queen in Dunedin in Hyde, and we lived in Hyde, Central Otago, and we travelled up over the Macraes Hill, and it was quite a journey, and There was 5 of us in the back seat, the 3 older siblings, and Tom and I. We were sort of sat forward with my younger brother in the front seat with Mum and Dad.
Wow. And off you went to town.
Yeah. Which was probably 60, maybe 100 miles. Yeah.
Oh, okay, speaking of miles, how many miles does this thing do to a gallon?
When they were built, they were known to do 27 miles to the gallon.
Gee,
Yeah.
that's not bad, is it?
Yeah. Apparently, when the 1941 model came out, they actually even did greater than that. They did near to 29 miles to the gallon. But
Wow.
so this vehicle, they came in 39, the Champions did, and so there's no part of this car which was part of another car, which used to be quite a general thing to do, is to make up parts from other cars. So everything about this car was brand new to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And tell me, when did you get it?
I got it in 1988. After Dad had died, my brother Tom, my twin brother Tom, he had the car, and then he was killed in a motor accident in 1988. So I purchased the car off his estate, and then went about having it restored to its original. Yeah. So I first run it went on was the Studebaker Nationals in 1990, which was in Christchurch. Yeah.
It was restored then or no?
It was restored then, yes.
Yeah, so the paint job it's got now is relatively new, isn't it?
Oh yes, I've had it repainted since that 1980. Well, I had it the first time was 1989. It was painted, and then I've actually repainted it. We're going around here. You'll notice there's no indicators.
Oh. And so I think this car had something to do with the Indianapolis 500.
Oh, yes, that's right. In 1940, it was the pace car for the Indianapolis car racing. Yeah, so that must have been quite an achievement to do that all those years ago.
So you enjoying the car, Michael?
Oh, I love this car. Yeah, it's really a beautiful car. It's a lovely car to drive. It's not so long ago I put some new radials on it, and George Pamflo, he's our parts man, and he'd got these from the States. They're white walls, and it just made such a difference to the way this car drives and handles. It's just amazing. It sticks on the road. I used to wander around everywhere when they had the radials on them, or the cross plies on them. Sorry, and it made such a huge difference. And it travels nicely. I mean, it probably would go faster, but I travel at about 55 mile an hour, and it's just a lovely pace to go. Yeah.
Well, good on you, Michael. I'm impressed. It certainly rides really, really well. Very comfortable.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
Yeah. Oh well.
Okay.
Good on you, mate. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next up, I've got a couple of unique cars, and when we were in America in October last year, we had a look at a car called a Tucker, and a Tucker was built about 1947-48, and there are only 50 of them ever built, plus one prototype. And it was interesting when I looked at the prototype, it had doors that opened sort of normally, but the other 50 had a suicide back door, so for some reason they changed that. So interesting. And the other interesting car, which the Tucker has taken some notice of and used some of the ideas that were in that car, is a Cord, and that was built late 1930s. So interesting. So we're going to have a look at a Tucker, and then we'll have a look at a Cord. This is a Tucker, and like the 51 and 50, it's got a piece in the front here. The Studebaker ones have got what they call a bullet nose in there, but this one's got a light. Just a little bit about Tucker. This is the prototype. This is the one that they made in 1946 and brought out in 1946. And they took it to the shows and they got orders for 25,000 tuckers. They had a network of dealerships set up to sell these 25,000 tuckers, but the big three, the Ford, Chrysler and Chev, took them to court for fraud. And time they got through all that and spent all the money, they were basically broke. It's a bit of a shame. The unique thing about these things is the engine is in the back, so the engine department's in the back, and underneath here is a boot. There's another one next door. We'll have a look at that in just a second. But also interestingly enough is we looked at a cord, got a coffin nose bonnet on it, but it's got out to the side, it's just got a little lever slots for the changing the gears, and I see this one's got exactly the same thing. An interesting dashboard, just a round circle with everything in it, in an elaborate little frame, and it's got this little levery thing to change the gears. It's actually quite roomy in there, you've got to say. But this car, you might notice, has got conventional doors. In other words, they all open up, and the back one opened up. And this is the prototype. This is what this looks like. Next door is car number 13 they built, and it's got, the back door is actually suicide. So it's just a little bit different from the original. Now, the light on the front there, the big three moaned about having a light, and so they made a rule that you weren't allowed to have 3 headlights in the front, and so it's there, but as I said, you know, everything turned to custard for them not too long ago. And at the same time, Studebaker, just a little bit later on, 1951, they too had this surround ready for a light. But the rule said, no, you can't have a light, so they changed it to the bullet nose that you see in them these days. And I just thought that was just an interesting comparison to the Tucker, famous American car that didn't make it, and the Studebaker 51 and 50 having the bullet nose in the front. But very, very flash car for its time, way ahead of everything else. And you know, when Ford, Chrysler and them started producing cars again, they just more or less carried on from the 1942 when they entered the war. So during the war they couldn't get steel, so they couldn't produce cars, but they could produce trucks for the war effort and things like that, Jeeps and what have you. But anyway, you might recall a couple of years ago we were up in the far north of America, and we went into the great big airfield they have at McMinnville, and we looked at the big huge flying boat called the Spruce Goose that belonged to Howard Hughes, and for some reason they've called this the Tin Goose. I guess the same result happened with Howard Hughes as happened to these guys, so just an interesting little note. The engine in the Tucker is in the rear, and I've come from the red one to the blue one, and the blue one is number 13 of 51. And they powered it with a helicopter engine, so it was air-cooled, and they thought being air-cooled they'd be able to get enough air to go around it to actually keep it cool. And there's vents at the beginning of the back mudguards to help push the air through to circulate this engine, but it wasn't enough to keep it cool, so they've added like in a marine engine, they marined it more or less, so the water jackets are added, and this engine is actually an opposing engine. The pistons sort of go away from each other on a central crankshaft, and then they put a radiator in to sort of help keep it cool. But it's just interesting to note that going completely different way of powering a vehicle. Everybody else, of course, has got an engine in the front and a drive shaft that drives the back wheels, but not Tucker. He's completely different. So, and I said before, got on him, and you've got to be a bit different to sort of, you know, keep the wheels turning. So if you're anywhere near Huntington, which is south of a town called State College, where the State University for Pennsylvania is. It's really worth a visit. Here it is on the map, and there's their website. Give them a look at them on the website, and if you're coming over this way, be sure to call in. So there you go, another interesting aspect of our tour of America. Every now and then you come across something absolutely extraordinary, and this is one of those occasions. What we've got here is a 1937 812 Cord, C-O-R-D. I've seen a few of these cars in museums around the world, and I know there are a couple in New Zealand here. And a couple we've seen had pipes, or a pipe, maybe two pipes coming out of the side of the bonnet. And those versions were supercharged versions of the Cord. And I think Cord were way ahead of their time when they designed this car, in that, for instance, the headlights, and in the front of the mudguards has got these little slots, and behind there is the light. And in the cabin they've got two little winders, one each side, so it works on a cable. So you wind the cable in the cab and the little lights will open up and down it goes. Actually, I'll see if I can actually get it to work. Shouldn't be too cars, so I'll just, and there it goes. And look at that, ready to head off. And when you finish the day, you just rewind it and it shuts it again, and there you go. Tickety boo. This didn't really happen until about 1964 when they had the lights into the mudguard. I think Chev did it. But it's a long time, since 1964 back to 1937 when they did this. This is a front-wheel drive car, and the French actually invented front-wheel drive, and Cord have taken it on board, and the reason they did that was so they could lower it. It wasn't so high, it was a low car. The average car in the 1930s was about 2 meters tall. But because they put front-wheel drive, it meant that they can lower it a wee bit, and also doesn't have the hump in the through the middle to the, take the drive shafts through to the diffs at the back. But a stunning design. This bonnet is actually quite long, and because of the square shape of it, people thought it looked like a bit like a coffin, so they called it the coffin nose Cord. Let's have a look at the bonnet. That is a Lycoming engine, and Mr. Cord, in his wisdom, bought the Lycoming engine company. And Lycoming engines pretty much specialise in aeroplane engines, but they did make obviously car engines as well. And in America there were lots of engine makers. Waukesha were one of them, Lycoming. It's a V8. And probably one of the first V8s to come out. I think Ford might have been already making his V8, but I'm not sure on that one. But Chev didn't really start making V8s until the 50s. But 1937, the Lycoming people made their V8. And another version you could get with this is that they could add a supercharger to it, which meant that there was a pipe coming out of the side. But that's absolutely stunning. Great big long horn, 2 horns each side, so I bet that sounds really, really good. The inside of this is all muffled, so I guess that's interesting. And it's also got an interesting radiator cap. That's really interesting. Not a radiator cap as we know it. The flutes on the side here, all the way back. Then we come to a suicide door, and everything in there is leather. The dashboard in this car is absolutely stunning. In fact, if you got into a 1940, 1939 Diamond C truck, the deluxe model, it had a dashboard very, very similar to this. There was a gauge for everything and lots of little switches, and and knobs and what have you. But anyway, that's it. The gear stick comes off the side of the steering column, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots that you can, just a little lever that pops into the slots. But we'll listen to that. We'll have a look at that gear stick and the tick. And then in the back, we open up the door, and it's got a strap to hang on to, plenty of leg room, and the way that this door's designed, there's enough room there to sort of swing your bum in this little gap and you're sitting in it. A stunning colour, and the windscreen is opened a wee bit so a bit of air can flow through to the passengers as you travel along. And they did this in the 1930s and 40s and even the 50s. I think it stopped in the maybe early 60s, but you don't see this these days, where the windscreen can roll out and air can come in. So just looking at this dashboard, no power steering of course, so it's a reasonably sized wheel. And in the corner here we've got a winder, and there's a winder in that corner, and what that does, when you wind it, it opens up the headlights out the front, and when you're finished with it you wind it back the other way and they close again. So we've got a temperature gauge, oil filler gauge, the speed in miles, so it goes up to 120 miles an hour. Then you've got a rev counter. What's after that is a oil pressure, the next big gauge, and the last one is a clock. And then underneath that we've got a amp meter, and as I said, there's a water temperature on this side. And then we come to these 4 little switches in the middle, which basically one's the choke, one's the gas, it says, one's lights, and the other one's an instrument lights. But this is the gear stick, and there's 4 little slots for the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I guess over this side and up is reverse. And you've got to remember this is a front wheel drive, so all of that componentry is out the front around the engine. So it's just, I haven't seen anything like this wheel, but it's a bit like the pre-selector they had in the old Daimler buses back in the day. You sort of put it in, and when you push the clutch it went into gear, and put it down for the next one, push the clutch, it goes into gear, and that might be how it actually worked. But anyway, if you look inside this car, leather seats, we've got an armrest that comes into the front. The mudguards are like a lot of Diamond T. That was a truck and a half, and their mudguards are similar to this in that they sort of perfectly moulded sitting on the side of the truck. I love these flutes that go down the side of the engine here, right around the front and back down the other side. But the windscreen, as I was saying, they open up. There's a couple of little air vents that put a bit of air underneath, so it's sort of flowing around your seat as you travel along. But this is the boot, and previous to this it just came down. I think it may have had a wheel sitting on the back, but a lot of people complained there was no boot space, so with the 37 they've included this boot. And there's a couple of clips here, really fancy clips to unlock it, and there's a little Cord logo there, and the same as the front bumper, it's got the little 3 rows of decoration, I suppose you call it, but and even the nuts are chromed on the inside. And over here it's got a little lockable fuel tank. The old Cord, this is just absolutely stunning. There's nothing I can say, it just blows you away. When you see this car you just go, wow, this has completely got the wow factor.